This is Shalom World Podcast.
Have you ever thought about the clash between our digital world and what's right and wrong? That's where The Porn Disaster comes in, a series that dives into one of society's most hush-hush topics. Get ready for some real talk as we dig into the ups and downs of today's tech-driven desires. Kids, relationships, recovery, we're not holding back. From the Catholic Church's take on porn to why our brains get hooked, we cover it all. Join us as we chat about the messy stuff, the good, the bad, and the uncomfortable. Hosted by Patricia Keane, we've got an expert panel here to chat about porn addiction, what it does, how it affects us, and how we can heal.
Hello, welcome to Shalom World. This is Patricia Keane, and I am presenting a 12-part series on pornography called The Porn Disaster. This episode is about what are children capable of learning about porn? What can their little brains absorb? Is there a limit? How do parents go about teaching them? My guests today:
Father Alan Hoffa, priest from the Diocese of Allentown, USA. He has BA in Philosophy and Masters in Divinity. Father Chris Hayden, priest from the Diocese of Ferns, Ireland. Spiritual Director, St. Patrick's Seminary, Maynooth. Dr. Kielty Oberlin. She's from Ireland, doctorate in psychology and master's in counseling, specializing in eating disorder recovery. Gerard O'Donoghue. He is an engineer from Ireland, counseling parents and creating awareness around pornography.
We're looking at a debate that's going on about, do kids deserve digital privacy? So my first question is to Father Alan. Father Alan, do children deserve digital privacy?
I think it would be better to be said that instead of granting children digital privacy, children need to be ensured digital security. And that means that we, as adults, especially the parents of the children, need to have it as a first priority, as in all things, to defend and protect their children. They teach them not to walk in front of cars. They teach them not to play with fire. They also need to be taught that there are things that can harm them on the internet, on their devices, and there needs to be a level of understanding that these things can hurt them and that the parents are doing what is necessary. In my work, I speak especially to parent groups about making sure that there are protections and securities on devices, that there are firewalls on Wi-Fi networks, because it's not only about parents either saying yes or no to a child having access to pornography, but it's the porn industry in what they use, that multi-billion-dollar industry and all those funds, to market and get younger and younger people connected to porn. And clickbait is a huge thing. So when it comes to educating the children, parents need to make it a priority to keep them safe, but then also to educate them. And you can do that in a way that is age appropriate. I think sometimes when the discussion of educating children about porn comes up, the first thing is parents worry, well, if I bring up the topic, I could be introducing porn to my child for the first time, and I could be the one pushing them into that. Okay, well, you may be concerned about that, but here's the thing. If it can be done, but at an age-appropriate level, you're not going to talk to a 5-year-old explicitly about pornography, but you can talk to them about good pictures and bad pictures. You can start as they're growing up to teach them about the wholesomeness of the body, what it's used for, what it's not supposed to be used for, that there are private areas and things like that, and that other people have private areas too. They should not be seen by one another. That is private, something that, and if something happens to violate that, then mom and dad especially, and then by that adults who are in schools, for instance, they are there to help keep children safe. So the issue is security and safety for our children, not to allow them to create a barrier between child and parent, the child creating that barrier so that there's certain things that the family and parents don't know.
I just want you to expound on clickbait, because it's a term that's bandied about quite regularly, and it's just two little words, clickbait, but there's a whole nuance behind clickbait. And you explained it to me a couple of days ago, but I just want to explain, people are of the understanding that a child might have to go 55 or 60 clicks before they will hit pornography. But explain how that works.
One of the big things to understand is that the reason why pornography, especially not so much pictures, still frames, but videos are so appealing to the human mind and why we get trapped in it is because of the activity and the visual nature of how our brains work and what we're attracted to. And so when you see, for instance, ads on on the side of a website or even on a browser, they're going to do things to create flashes of light, sounds even, to be able to attract you. And they put those things in there to be able to get you to click. It's basic marketing.
Is it done at an unconscious level?
By the industry? No, it's done very consciously. But for the person, it doesn't matter. In different industries are using the same modes to be able to attract them. So again, flashing lights, bright colors and all those things that seem, for instance, if they're trying to get to children, children like cartoons. Oh, look at this cartoon jumping around. Click. And it may not be the first click, but by click 2 or click 3, a child could be experiencing hardcore pornography with no type of supervision, and it could create a deep-seated trauma that doesn't come out for years that could be deeply affecting the child's sexual maturity and growth throughout their entire adolescence.
I think also, Patricia, we need in some ways to be reframing the whole issue of internet privacy, because it's the internet that is the intruder into privacy. We know what we mean by, adults speaking, we know what we mean by internet privacy, that our dealings online are private and our finances are private and secured and so on. But the internet itself is a great intruder into privacy, into the privacy of a child's life and mind and innocence and family life. So it's privacy from the internet, not just privacy on the internet. And if in some way we can say that children have rights, which of course we can, but those rights are always guaranteed by adults. And the question is, which adults? And to the extent that the conversation starts to drift towards creating some distance between the rights of the child over and against its parents, to the extent parents lose that supervisory and educational role, the state reaches in there. And the state does not ever have a particularly good record in these matters. So we need to be very careful when we talk about right to privacy, because the next question is, okay, to the extent that a child has a right to privacy, or any other right for that matter, but to the extent that a child has a right to privacy, who will guarantee that right? And if it's not mom and dad, who will it be? And in keeping with what values? And we might say in keeping with what love for that child. So these are things that I think can cry out for a bit of reframing. The right to privacy, it's quite a subtle thing, and it needs to be very carefully handled.
Kielty, I want you to go through the 7 signs that children could be watching porn for parents to look out for.
So, and keep in mind that of these signs, they could also be signs that, of being stressed or of other conditions. So, I mean, just kind of bear in mind, I just don't want parents to kind of jump up, they're watching porn. But this is also about keeping pornography, front and center, that parents do need to look for it. So with the 7 signs, one is a change in your child's personality. That you just notice that my child is acting differently to the way they usually do.
Give one example.
So their mood might change. They might become more argumentative. They might fight back a little bit more. And particularly if you say, let's say here, and this is another point, is that when you go to take away their devices, they lash out. Mm-hmm. So, and you'll see this in a lot of addictions. When the object is taken away, that's where their personality will drastically change, and they'll fight you for it. But changes in activities, that the things that they used to be interested in, they're not interested in anymore. So that they might, not be as interested in hurling or rugby or football that they were before, or some music, or friends. They might not be engaging.
They're gradually spending more time on their own.
And that's the other one, is that they're withdrawing from people, that they are spending more and more time alone. And part of that is a few factors are in that. Engaging in porn takes time. It needs to be done in isolation. And secondly, there is sort of, after engaging in porn, there's, like with somebody that's drinking coming out, the hangover. So it creates within the brain, the brain gets stimulated with a lot of chemicals, endorphins, dopamine. And it's the changes in those chemicals can lead to being tired as well. If the child is staying up at night, now we're also getting those changes. So there, for multiple reasons, there are these changes.
And do grades start going down?
That could be another sign. You might see a child who was doing well in school and is suddenly not. And for the same reasons, it's harder and harder to concentrate, especially on young minds when their mind is being stimulated. And that's what's happening when it's being stimulated digitally with the pornography, not to mention what's happening chemically and emotionally to them.
So what age group are we talking here?
For these 7
Yes,
signs? Any age group, actually, because we could apply these same 7 signs to adults as well.
But Anna, you've been working in the schools, and you're really doing the field work. We're doing the research, and Kielty is doing the clinical work. And what are you hearing and seeing?
I think one of the big things is educating teachers in this as well, because, if you look back before this whole boom of pornography and its accessibility, when a child did start their affect and their productivity started to change in schools, teachers might dismiss it to they're just being lazy or they don't care. Now, we know, especially as we've studied adolescent mental health, that there could be a whole bunch of things that family dynamics are changing, divorce, etc. But one of the big things that is not being talked about that they don't consider is there pornography? Is there something happened, a trauma even, that happened to my child? Because it could go to bullying, but it could also be to something that they saw something was perpetrated upon them in terms of sexual assault. And a big thing there that also wraps in with that, with the pornography issue, is not only with sexual assault and child abuse, that it's adult to child, but peer-to-peer sexual abuse is also on the rise because of this issue of pornography, because children, as they see it, they don't know what to do with it. But what do children do? They try to reenact what they see. And so the rise is there of peer-to-peer sexual abuse of children trying to do this to other children. And so you will see, as a teacher or a coach even, or someone who is involved with young people, if you see those changes in their affect, it is important to really get down to it. And you have to take it slowly, because you don't want to impose more trauma on the child, but get them to a guidance counselor or the child psychologist or whoever the person is, to guide them along those steps to find out what's changed, because this is who you were not too long ago, and we've noticed this change. And sometimes it's the courage of a person who does see it, because sometimes parents, because they're with the child each and every single day, it happens gradually for them, and before they know it. We used to deal with this children doing drugs. There was a certain affect, a facial change, especially with marijuana, and we would see that over the course of time, but the parents would say, my child looks no different, until you put a picture 2 years difference beside one another, and they go, oh my. The same thing, when you look at the mannerisms, it could happen slowly for a child who's getting deeper and deeper into pornography. Sometimes it takes someone from the outside to say to that parent, your child's changing, could it be this? And then go down that road to really see if it is.
The other question that I want to ask, and anyone can answer that, but is there a shift in friendships? For children, where her best friend is no longer her best friend. That's only an example.
Changes in who they associate with.
Yes.
The thing about the porn is that it will bring up, it's going to bring up a confusion and a sense of shame. Even in kids that are kind of, owning it. Yeah. Because it could be common among the peers. The adults may not know about it. As if they're, they'll retrospectively, I'll figure it out with them, with kid. But a lot of parents have no idea. And so it's been normalized within the population of the kids. So if the peers are all doing it now maybe if it's an onset and, a sudden onset of pornography, and you see a shift in friends. I think there's another aspect to what Father was saying about when kids that abuse could be going on family could be breaking up. There could be a lot of change within their safety. They could feel unsettled, unsafe within their own home environment. Porn could actually be sort of like a crack in their environment, and it would be very easy for people around to actually associate and attribute these changes that we just to everything that's happening within the home, unless we start bringing up having discussions about exploring whether or not porn is being used.
Does that present the divorce going on at home, split up, moving house or whatever, does that represent an opportunity to do so?
I think of that song, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. Yeah. Because when those relationships break down, people go looking, and adults do this too. They break up from a relationship, they go and want that soothing feeling, especially if there was sexual activity in an exclusive relationship and it's no longer there, and so they go looking for that elsewhere. And it is amazing the amount of people who attribute real human dependency, human relationship aspects to what is on the screen with that person, or people who are participating in those sexual acts in pornography. So yes, 100% a change in dynamic of relationship, looking for love because there's been some type of breakdown in it. And guess what? That person doesn't fight back. That person can't hurt me. And so there could be a lot of wounds and trauma there for that person, that now they're going and they're eliminating all those things that might have been harmful factors in the past, but it isn't found in the pornography, and they convince themselves it's perfectly okay.
Father Chris, when a child has been exposed to pornography, do you take the opportunity to re-educate them about healthy sexuality? And how would you go about that?
I think from every point of view, clinically, pastorally, for parents, that's an extremely difficult one, because it's really trying to square the circle. You can't leave stuff unaddressed. If your kid comes to you and says that they've seen some stuff and you ascertain that that your 7-year-old has, or your 8 or 9 or 10-year-old has been exposed to hardcore pornography, you can't leave it unaddressed. But that child is still in his or her innocence. So how do you address it in a way that doesn't do further damage? And I think from my reading on the issue, that the wisdom seems to be, even clinically and developmentally, no, address it. Don't just leave it aside on the fear that if you take it out and talk about it, that you're going to anchor the images somehow in the child's mind. The wisdom seems to be that you need to have a conversation in a very, very age-appropriate way. The good pictures, bad pictures model, and so on. But not simply to just forget about it, walk away, leave it, because there may be an element of being traumatized present straight away. So it may need to be dealt with early.
I think one of the big things too is we're talking a lot about what schools and parents could and should be doing, and or should not be doing. I think we have so much, especially within the context of the Catholic faith. We talk about the theology of the body, for instance, John Paul II's great gift to the church. And in that, we have the opportunity to teach the young human anthropology and what that means, from just being what it means to be a person, and how that applies to every facet of our life, not just our sexuality. One of the things that we're introducing through our commission in the diocese is that for the middle school, there is a program that is available. It could be shipped across the country or across the world, but Ascension Press has a program called Theology of the Body for Middle Schoolers. It's not sex education. What it is it's human education, and about how God made us, what he made us for. Those are the things that we should be introducing into schools to be able to help children, and also informing parents. This is the great gift of our sexuality, of our bodies, to use them in the right way, instead of letting the internet and pornography teach our children about who they are, because it completely misses the mark.
And here again, we can say that, Father Allen has been talking about what we call theology of the body, and it comes from a Catholic stable, but it answers to our human situation. If, let's say, a Catholic discovers a wonderful new drug that works wonders, we're not going to hang back and say, but hang on, he's Catholic. It must be some sort of a doctrinal little drug. We don't need that. We're not Catholics. We're atheists. No, the theology of the body, it's a fundamental understanding of the human person and of human sexuality that actually ticks the boxes.
For everybody.
For everybody.
Every person that
God made. It's not a narrow doctrinal Catholic niche. It's a wonderful thing that really does. It ticks the boxes for human life. But I want to go back for a moment to the concept of innocence and what children are able for. Innocence is, I suppose we could say, it's a moral and or a spiritual category. But you know, it has a seamless correlative in psychology. The concept of latency. Latency is, I mean, any parent will know that when you got your toddler can be clingy and waily and foot stomping and move from one emotional episode to the next. And then there's this wonderful period of when the child, for years, when the child is biddable and docile and curious and just wants to learn stuff. And then you move into the storms of adolescence. But that long period of docility or innocence, in psychological jargon, it's called latency. And it shouldn't be, during that period of latency, the child is sexually dormant, utterly asleep. Matters of sexuality, the child it's not the child's world. There's too much else to learn. And the child is not wired by Mother Nature to be dealing with issues. So when we start dropping in issues that disturb that latency, we're compromising the child's wonderful capacity to sponge up all this other stuff. Because let's face it, for everybody, sexuality, these are big things. They divert our attention. And a child's attention is meant to be given to learning more and more and experiencing more and more of this wonderful big world, rather than focused more and more deeply on the narrower and very challenging, developmentally challenging issues of sexuality. So when we talk about preserving a child's innocence, we're not just making some little doctrinal or narrow moral point. Again, we're speaking to a developmental issue that's very real and concrete, even in the terms of psychology.
Yeah, just a couple of points there in terms of the digital privacy. I think my role as a parent is I should know, it's my duty to know, call it parental diligence, if you must, what are they watching? Because it's critical. I mean, like, there's... You don't get many chances in this. It was like there was a woman on the internet and she was saying that most people, like if you mention porn, they'll think of Playboy. She says you're 20, 30 years out of date. She said, and she was giving a conference and she said, you type in any search engine, and she started, I'm not going to mention it here, what comes up. It's immediately hardcore. You know, so you just...
There's no stepping up there.
There's no stepping up. There's nothing kind of like, going back to the clickbait. Within 2 or 3 clicks, you're into bad stuff that none of us should see. But certainly a child, like certainly that innocence. The other thing too about the opportunity when a child says they've seen something, that's the opportunity to take the secrecy out of it. Yeah. And by taking the secrecy out of it, you take the shame out of it. I've had 1 or 2 experiences of it. It wasn't serious stuff. But at first I was like, what did you see? You know, it's calm down, because like, if you take that approach, the next time they won't say, Dad's going to flip the lid now or whatever. So it's just, I took the opportunity, just chatted through. And another Catholic parent gave me the tip one time, chat driving in the car. Bring the child with you on their own. And it's a great way of driving, because if it gets a bit awkward, you can pretend you're concentrating on your driving. If he gets a bit awkward, he can look out the window and say, oh, look at this. And he can gently kind of just bring it back in. But it's a lovely way of that. You're not sitting them down now. Let's talk about this now. What did you see? And he's awkward and I'm awkward, or she's awkward, you know. So these are just little tips that I'm picking up along the way.
You're working your way up along through it, and it's great to know that, because that's really why you're here as the parent. And yes, so we've come to the end of episode 4 of The Porn Disaster, and next week we are going to be looking at what does pornography teach children about sex. Thank you, panelists. Great to have you again, and thank you for joining Shalom World, and look forward to seeing you at episode 5.
And that wraps up another episode of The Porn Disaster. Thank you to our incredible panelists for sharing your expertise and insights. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in and being part of this important conversation. If you've been impacted by anything we discussed today, know that help is available. Understanding leads to healing, and by shedding light on these tough topics, we are one step closer to positive change. Join us next time for another enlightening discussion. Until then, take care and stay curious.
Shalom World Podcasts is now available on all online platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others.